I guess I always wanted to, or I always was busy dancing and making dances up, but never studied classically until I was in, 23 or something. Never did a ballet class, but always knew that I wanted to make dance and sort of be busy with that. And I didn't take a formal dance class until I was 15, which was ballroom dancing, which was something I didn't intend to pursue, but through different friends it kind of happened. And I did that for a number of years and was very, very into that. And yeah, and then that was between kind of the ages of 15 to 17 or something like this. So that kind of became my world. I would go to school and then I would go to the dance studio every afternoon and sort of train. So that was kind of like, I guess, my first experience of training in an institution, I guess. And then I fell out of that and was finishing school and kind of flunked out of school and had this 5 years of partying and kind of, experimenting with the world, and then sort of got bored of that and found contemporary dance in the university setting in Sydney. I sometimes wonder about information and where it lies, Like I definitely feel that when I was 22, I needed to go to Amsterdam or to Europe, or, that's where it was for me. But I needed to leave Australia and get information that isn't here and wasn't here, and I still think is not accessible from here. And I do think that, and I intend to continue to sort of have these journeys to kind of collect tools or information, or just to see things and bring, to have that experience, and then, but to be based here, I think, now. Making Cannibal, which was the second work after Thousands, which was the debut solo, I realised very close. It's interesting, the different timelines of these processes. Thousands I worked on for a year, kind of sporadically and in quite concentrated chunks, but then always kind of just chipping away at it. And the piece was very formed about 5 weeks out, and then very, very formed 3 weeks out. Like I was basically just running this piece. And making the next work, Cannibal, I had a completely different experience where I was in the theatre for 2 weeks in the lead up to opening, which was amazing. But I was also painting a black box white, which was a little bit insane, and I didn't realise the extent of that work, and that in some way, and I didn't have a work at this point. Like I had a whole bunch of stuff, but I certainly didn't have a work, and it really, for me, I didn't feel like I had a work until 5 days before I had an audience. And and I think that was a terrifying but very great lesson in just knowing, and I know that now I'm not going to expect the next process to be like this one or that one. So in some ways, I let go of a methodology. And on the other hand, I think that one of the reasons it took me so long to get to a piece is because I had this expectation that the second piece needed to be and should be very different to what I'd done with with the first piece. So I was really like censoring a lot of my time in the studio and sort of going, no, this is too similar to what you were doing before. You need to do something different. You need to challenge yourself a bit more. And then, like 2 weeks out, I let go of that and gave it up and just was like, no, this is what you're interested in. Just go into it. And I realized it produces something completely different. Like my interest is this, or these are my interests. And I can come at it from different angles, but I can still come at the same stuff. And so that was a huge lesson. Cannibal has very direct references to thousands. In fact, it kind of starts in part, I kind of go into part of thousands to start this piece, and I kind of steal this kind of vibration, this small vibration that happens unconsciously or automatically in my body from working so slowly, which happens at this kind of peak where this kind of loud sound that you're talking about. And so this is where I start the next piece, and I kind of extract and excavate this and kind of put some volume under that, and then I take this on a journey for the next piece. So Cannibal kind of does this for 40 minutes or however long it goes for that night, and I kind of extend this vibrating thing, and it's what is unconscious or automatic I make. I start driving and engineering and kind of playing around with it, and then that produces a whole other sort of set of results or affects that I'm not actually producing. So like the sweat and what that does to my physicality, and what it does, the trails that it leaves in space, and so again, I'm kind of choreographing the surface of the work, and then there's kind of these currents that are kind of what the work maybe really is. Or when I started making the first solo, I was working in this way that I've worked for quite a while, with these kind of like time frames and kind of scores. So go in, do this for this long, come out, what happened. And I gave that up after a couple of months, and I started to trust my interest and go in and do something for as long and probably a bit longer than I thought it was interesting for, and just trust that if I do something, rather than saying do this for half an hour or do it for an hour, just kind of going with. So sometimes it'll extend into this very long thing, and then I'll try and find what it is, or I get bored after 3 minutes, and I end up sitting, like I get distracted, and I go on YouTube and I watch Lady Gaga film clips, or I read theory, or I lie on the floor, or I talk on the phone. So I have the studio doesn't, I don't need to limit it to these things. And I think that in a way, it's important to work like this and to allow myself the distractions and being lost and having that conversation, and, actually just staring at the wall for half an hour. And somehow this is giving the space and time to ideas to kind of have their own life. And I don't know, I think visual artists have studios that they build these worlds in, and they go away, and this world exists, and there's conversation always happening. And as dancers, we don't often have a studio that's ours, and we're kind of using studios here, there, after that person, before that person. There's no history that builds up in the space. So somehow having space and time where you're not just working, for me, allows the space around the work that I think maybe happens in, for example, now I'm only a dancer. I'm only going to be a dancer. I've decided not to be a choreographer for at least the next 5 months, although I've started working on the work. So I'm just going to go in, and I know it's a trick, but to go in and just work, to follow my desires as a dancer. And it's, for me as a dancer, it's kind of like, it's about moving and kind of going with these interests and finding these things, and then if the choreographer comes in and puts limits on it all. And
so at the moment it's very improvisational.
Yeah, I mean, I'm lying to you because I'm already choreographing what I'm doing. I think maybe it's about this happening. Like it's, I guess just giving time frames to sort of, I think because I've spent the last I always say 2 years, but it's only really 18 months making work, you know, like really like there's, you know, you know, and not just the 2 solos, but other smaller things, and kind of like always making work. And so I just feel like I don't want to make anything. And although I am kind of doing this slow lead in, so I'm giving myself this dancer time. But I think the struggle between the dancer and the choreographer is super interesting, and the dramaturg, or whatever these different roles are, you know, it's kind of what produces. And, you know, and also what's super interesting is performing. It's only just doing this last season of Cannibal that I realised that the choreographer has no permission to be on the stage in front of an audience. Like, fuck off. Like, no, you know, you're a dancer now and you just need to perform and stop having that choreographic kind of perspective on what's happening. And like, you know, yeah, so that's interesting. But then at the same time, I'm always making the work as it's happening. So there's the choreographer in that. So.